Hi there, and welcome to Penn Central 99's channel. On this video, I'm going to do a makeover or an upgrade of one of my HO scale locomotives. For this upgrade, it's currently DC, so I'm going to install a DCC sound decoder along with the speaker to go with that. The current lights are incandescent bulbs in the headlights. There are no ditch lights, so what I need to do is upgrade them to LEDs plus get some working ditch lights to make it a little bit more realistic. So let's go ahead and get started. The object of my desire for this project is this HO scale Athearn ready to run C44-9W. You can see it's painted in the Union Pacific scheme with the wavy flag and a road number 9807. I'm not sure how old this locomotive is, but I've had it for probably 4 or 5 years. It runs good on DC, but it's time for an upgrade to DCC with sound. I got a DC power pack out just to give you an idea of its current mode of operations. Now once I turn it up to full speed, you'll get to see what the current lighting package looks like, which is only headlights in the nose, and there aren't any ditch lights. So for DC, it doesn't sound too bad. The lights in the nose aren't that bad, but they're not that great. They can be better. And as you can see, I got fake lit ditch lights, which I'm going to install real working ditch lights in this unit. I'm going to put you on the overhead for a couple of reasons. One, obviously the camera's out of the way. Two, my hands are free so that I can do the work. And most importantly, you get to see what's going on while we do this upgrade or makeover. Taking these Athearn locomotives apart is pretty simple. As you see, I've got my foam cradle here. I want to try and protect the locomotive as much as possible from scratches and breaking while we're doing this. Now, to take this apart, this particular model is pretty simple. The front coupler pocket is here, the rear coupler pocket is here. They're held in by little screws. So once we remove those couplers and coupler pockets, the frame and the body or the shell will separate pretty easily. Some of the older Athearn style locomotives have little tabs or slots for the shell to sit into the frame. Yeah, these have tabs, but they don't lock like some of the older models. It's just merely to line up the shell and the frame so that they go together pretty simply. So I'm going to go ahead and take this apart. One of the other things that I do while I'm working on these locomotives to not lose parts, I use these little plastic sauce cups or bowls or whatever you want to call them. You can get these just about anywhere. When you order pizza, get sauce delivered, or you go to a Chinese restaurant and get your sauces and your dips and stuff, that's all these little plastic cups are. I use them to keep the parts while I'm doing projects so things aren't all over the place and fall apart. Pull that screw out. Pull the coupler pocket out. Take this one out. Oops. You know what they say, stuff happens. Now, I've had this apart before, so I know what happens. If you haven't had stuff apart before, you're not really sure what's going to happen. Make sure you securely hold all parts and pieces so it doesn't fall apart. Now, I'm just going to roll this over because the frame is the heaviest. Watch how very easily and very gently that comes apart. Let's take a look at some of the components underneath the shell here just to make sure everybody's on the same page. These wires here are the headlights. These are the rear lights. There's 2 bulbs per front and back, so they'll need to be separated. While we're taking a look here, this is your 9-pin adapter. Since this is DCC ready, here's your 9-pin adapter. If you're using an 8-pin plug, that feature or component is right here. Here you can see we have our motor leads for the rear. motor leads for the front are right here. What we're going to do is I'm just going to remove that entire board and put in a Soundtraxx Tsunami decoder. So let's go ahead and get started. These wires for the front headlight will just pull out. The wires for the rear are held in place a little bit by two tabs. So what we want to do is this back cover will come apart, and I'm just pushing up from the inside. You see how that's separated there? That will come apart, and you can now easily see the wires for the rear headlights. So just pull those out, or the rear backup lights. Just pull those apart, and now the shell is completely separated from the body, so we can get some work done. Another thing before we get too far is we want to maintain orientation of the locomotive in the shell. And that's equally important because when you put in a decoder, obviously the front of the decoder needs to go towards the front of the locomotive. Now, once we take all this apart, you see pretty much everything, especially when we remove this motherboard, everything will look pretty much the same. So in order for me to maintain orientation where front is, I just take a Sharpie and I make a little mark right here on the front of the frame. You can draw right an F if you want to. I just make a little mark indicating that at the front of the locomotive so that I can maintain orientation for when I install the parts. The speaker is going to go in the back here. There is plenty of room. There's a lot of room underneath this shell, so this should go relatively quickly, but the speaker is going to get mounted in the back here over top of the rear truck, and I think it's going to sound awesome. I'm going to do a close-up and try and hold the camera straight so you can see what's going on. Like any other manufacturer, Athearn uses these little plastic tabs to hold their wires on. You can see a couple of them here. Here's the ones for the front. This is standard for most manufacturers. It's cheaper and easier to get this stuff connected and get them out. But one of the reasons why I solder wires, and the choice is yours, you can do whatever you want. This is the lead for the negative side of the motor, or the bottom. Now, even though that plastic connector is on there, I can move that wire back and forth inside of there. So if you're using these plastic leads and your locomotive sputters and spits and shorts and stops and this, that, and the other thing, that could be a reason why. So hence a reason why I pull these little plastic tabs off of there and solder them, which is what I'm going to do. The other thing is this board is pop riveted onto the top bar on the top of the motor for the positive lead, so this is going to come apart relatively easy. So let me get this stuff apart, and then we'll go on to the next step. Here's what it looked like with that motherboard removed. You can see these are the leads for the front truck pickup. This is the bottom motor lead, and these are the leads for the rear truck pickup. Pretty basic and simple. This frame is plastic, and since it's DCC ready, the motor should be isolated from the frame to prevent from any kind of electrical shorts. But since we have it stripped down this far, I'm just going to flip this over, and I'm going to pull this motor out, loosen these 4 screws and pull the motor out, look underneath there to see how that bottom motor lead is attached. If it's not soldered, I'm going to solder it. And also, I might as well just put a piece of electrical tape underneath there to make sure that we don't have any shorts. The motor's loose from the frame, so I'll just pull it out and flip it over, and they have the wire soldered onto a clip that goes onto the bottom motor contact. You know what, I might as well just go ahead and solder that onto this one and eliminate yet another connection. The less potential for problem, the better off you are. And I don't know if you can see that or not. How they have that. But I'm just going to take that and solder it over to this end, and then I'm just going to take a piece of electrical tape and put it here to eliminate any kind of a short. Okay, the motor's back in the frame. I've got the motor leads wired, soldered up and ready to go. Now it's time to install the decoder. And what we're using for this sound decoder install is a Soundtraxx Tsunami. You can see here it's a GN1000. This is the GE FDL16, which is designed for one of many locos, including the 944-CW. So out of the package, here's what the decoder looks like. Very thin, very narrow. It's going to sit right here on top of the motor assembly. Like I say, I've got plenty of room to mount this stuff. What I'm going to use is a piece of double-sided foam tape. I'm going to put a small strip right there. I don't want to use a whole lot, I just want enough to hold it in place. And that decoder is going to sit right there. And then all my motor leads, or my electrical pickups, motor leads, and speaker are going to get soldered right in there. When installing these sound decoders, when you open the package, you can see that you have written instructions along with diagrams in order to install this. Now, even though my locomotive is facing to the right, the wiring is still pretty much the same, because on here everything is labeled. You can see here it says front, so obviously that's the rear, they don't label that, but your speaker connections, speaker positive, speaker negative, and that's when you're using more than one speaker because they need to be wired in series. Motor negative, motor positive. Over here is your F5 and F6. So the electrical pickups, front and rear, left and right, will get soldered on there. So just follow the instructions. You can see this is pretty legible and pretty plain, pretty simple to do. One of the things with the GNs, which are designed for Athearn, they have a particular connection here because these are designed for those incandescent bulbs. Most of us switch to LEDs, so we need more electricity than that 1.5. So here's a 14 volt connection in order to hook up the LED lights, and I'll show you how we do that when we get to that point. The electrical pickups have been soldered, and so have the motor leads. You can see here I've got the left and right front, left and right rear. You can't see the motor leads because they have the wires tucked in underneath the decoder board just for cleanliness. But here's the lead, so let's go ahead and put it on the layout and apply power and to make sure I've got everything wired up correctly before we go to the next step. Okay, we're on the layout. Let's go ahead and apply power and see what happens. What you hear is my other locomotive starting up. They should go through their shutdown sequence here in a second. Okay, so far so good. We've got power. I've already got Loco 3, or address 3 shall I say. Since these decoders come from the factory preset with an address 3, I've already got that loco, address number 3 ready to go. Let's see what happens when we go forward here. Okay, so far so good. Let's hit reverse. Alright, seems like we have our electrical contacts wired correctly, so let's go ahead and move on to the next step. Now it's time to install the speaker. The speakers that I use for this is the Railmaster Hobbies. You can see there it's an 8 ohm bass reflex speaker. It gives you the size of the speaker, which fits pretty well underneath the shell of an HO scale locomotive. The nice thing about these from Railmaster Hobbies is this particular model already comes with an enclosure, so don't have to build it. But the thing is that these tabs, mounting tabs, I'm going to break them off because I really don't need them underneath here. It's going to give me a little bit of more room underneath there too, and they're just plastic and they snap right off without damaging the enclosure. So I'm going to get that prepared, get that wired into the speaker, and then we'll hear what it sounds like. Okay, the speaker's in. I just have it sitting there to make sure that we've got sound, so let's go ahead and start it up and see what happens. Well, so far so good. Bell. electrically and sound wise, everything seems to be going okay so far. Shut down. Okay, with that, it's time for lighting. Okay, for the headlight and the backup light, what I will be using is some Evans Designs 3mm warm white LEDs. What I'm going to do is use some of this 1.5mm fiber optic tubing. You can see the tip of it there. And place that on the end of these LED lights. Use some shrink wrap so that I can funnel that light right to the tip of the fiber optic wire, and that fiber optic wire will fit exactly right in those holes there in the nose assembly. Okay, real quick lesson on the fiber optic tubing and the LED lights that I use. Like I said, this is a 3mm warm white light from Evans Designs. So what I do is I take some shrink tubing, that's about 1 inch long or whatever. I just slide that down over top of the light. I take the fiber optic tubes and slide them down into the shrink wrap, and then I just take the soldering iron and I warm that up. Just going to hold that. You don't want to do too much because you can distort those fiber optic tubes, but you just want to heat that enough to melt the shrink wrap down around the light and hold it in place. Doesn't take much. Nice little increments. Flip it over and do the other side. Because what you're just trying to do is hold it in place, plus direct the light to the tip of the fiber optic tube where you want it. And that's enough in place. Okay, I have the headlight assembly in, and you can see there's the 3mm Evans light, 2 pieces of fiber optic tubing with shrink wrap around it. And here's what it looks like on a 9-volt battery. Man, that's sweet. Wait till I get the ditch lights going. As we move forward with this project, there's a couple of things we need to do along the way. Since I'm getting ready to put the lights in the rear, you can see that these tabs that they have installed to help guide or hold the wires in place, well, the middle one's going to be in the way of the fiber optic tubing that I'm using for the lighting. Plus, this is designed for, I think, like a 1-inch speaker that you can lay in there. But since I'm using that rectangular bass reflex speaker, I'm going to get rid of that cross arm there. I really don't need it. It's in the way of the speaker because I want the speaker to sit as high up in the shell as possible. So I'm going to need to remove that middle tab, that cross arm there, plus to make room for the fiber optic wires, I'm going to need to cut out a little slot here in this so that the tubes will fit in between there. Okay, after a little bit of carving, I've got that cross arm out of there, and that came out pretty easy. I just used an X-Acto knife to carve that out of there, cut that out of there. But this speaker now fits down in there perfectly, and it rests on that other crossbar for the back where the lights go. Plus, it still gives me enough room between the top of that truck and the bottom of the speaker so that it moves freely and doesn't get bound up. So nice and smooth. Plus, there's enough room now to put those LED lights in there for the rear. The next thing we're going to do is the ditch lights. I guess what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drill out these ditch lights and use these HDA Modelworx surface mount warm white LEDs. You can see They're pretty small. I've already broken off one of the simulated ditch lights. So when I hollow that out with a drill bit, I should be able to slide that surface mount LED right in there. I broke that off intentionally because I need to get it in there. So I'll just glue these back on when I get done. So for now, I'm just going to break off these fake ditch lights, hollow them out, and use those surface mount LEDs, and we should be ready to rock. Okay, later that same day, finally get the ditch lights wired in. I ended up doing what I said I was going to do. I just hollowed these old ditch light assemblies out. I inserted the surface mount LEDs in there, and then just drilled out the hole behind there a little bit bigger to fit the wire. Super glued them back in, and then when I got done, I instead of making it look like it was hollowed out, I put some Elmer's glue in there. One, to seal that, and two, now that the Elmer's glue is dried clear, it almost looks like a lens that's in there. So, all said and done, later, voila. Now we got headlights and ditch lights, a little bit of CV programming, and I'll have flashing ditch lights. Or maybe I'll just leave it like that, since UP does not operate flashing ditch lights. Everything is steady. But there you go. Just a few hours later, a little bit of ingenuity, and we now have operating ditch lights. We're almost there. All we need to do is put the remaining pieces together, which is pretty much the wiring. This speaker, I'm going to use some of that double-sided foam tape. I'm going to put a strip here and a strip here to hold that in place. And then I'm going to wire up the leads to the lights. Okay, just a quick lesson in soldering. I'm going to tin this tab right here. I've already got some flux on there. I'm going to heat that up and put a drop of solder on there. I don't want to do it too much because I'm taking a chance on damaging the board. Okay, got a nice bead of solder on there. Because what we're going to do is now we're going to come back and tap our tin wires onto those connections, and we'll be ready to go. Okay, the final wiring consists of hooking up all the positive leads. And like I said earlier, because this is designed for Athearns and their 1.5 volt bulbs, in order to use LEDs you need to hook everything up to this 14 volt outlet. Now I've already soldered a lead wire on there, because in order to get 4 wires on there, that's awful tricky. And where do we get 4 wires from? I got a front light, a back light, and 2 ditch lights. That's 4 positive leads that need to go to that outlet. So I've already got about a 2-inch lead on there, so I just need to hook up all 4 wires to that lead and solder it together. On a Soundtraxx Tsunami GN decoder, if you're wondering how to tell the difference between the positive and the negative side, the rectangular tab is negative and the oval tab is positive. So if you were wiring this up normally for 1.5 volt lights, positive, negative, but since we are using LED lights, all I did was wire up the negative leads to the rectangular tabs for the lights. All the positives went to this 14 volt. Okay, here we are on the layout. Let's fire her up and see what she does. Sounds pretty good so far. Let's try the bell. Okay, bell works. Horn. Headlight looks good. Ditch lights look good. I guess those LEDs are so bright it's affecting the camera. You really can't see the individualness of it. Now, of course, I still have some CVs to program. Come around to the backup light. Let's go into reverse. Okay. Forward. That looks pretty good. Okay. I would say that I'm pretty much done with this project, with the exception of programming a couple of CVs. I think that's it. Well, that pretty much does it for this video, and as you saw, we got to install a DCC sound decoder, a speaker to go with it, and some cool LED lights to give it a new look and a new sound. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you learned something, and as always, thanks for watching.